To cloud. Here we go.
All right. So welcome. This is our first official Zoom info session. Missing meeting people in real life, but happy to be here. And thank you guys for joining us. So I'm going to pop in headphones because I hear a little bit of an echo of myself. And basically, our kind of like plan for today, and we're happy to kind of like go with what's actually needed and what specific questions you have. But we are going to, first of all, introduce ourselves a bit so you know who we are. I'm Erin, this is Audra. And then we're going to tell you a little bit about Tidewater Friends of Foster Care, and then we would love for you guys to introduce yourselves and just tell us what brings you here today, basically, so we can make sure that we answer your specific questions and talk about your needs. And then we'll do like a bit of an overview of what's going on about becoming a foster parent, about the PPP program, and then we have like open Q&A. So any questions that you have, we can talk about specifically. Does that sound good? Cool, fabulous.
Awesome.
So Audra, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. So my name's Audra Bullock, and I'm the founder and director of Tidewater Friends of Foster Care. The organization came about as really kind of an extension of wanting to do more for one particular child that was in my home. At the time when I became a foster parent in 2015, was working in a engineering capacity, completely different realm than this nonprofit stuff, and quickly realized that what's offered to foster kids is probably all the state and federal government can do, but it's not enough. Not only is it not enough because, you know, of the limited resources that they have, but the foster parents that they had been able to attract historically were not necessarily having the means to kind of match what is needed to bring the level of support up to what makes a full and healthy childhood. And as I looked at, you know, these social workers that were working so hard with very limited resources, you know, in very traumatic cases and what they are able to emotionally handle and deal with, it seemed more like triage than being proactive. And my husband and I kind of sat around and said, maybe we can do something more for the rest of the children to try and help bridge some gaps that the not only the state funds won't provide, but emotionally people that are coming to the table might need support with. So we founded Tidewater Friends of Foster, actually started with Norfolk Friends of Foster Care, really around supporting the children that are in the social service agency that I license with, which is the Norfolk Department of Human Services. And that quickly spun into a regional effort. And we have two primary missions. One is to really bring people like you into the sphere of helping these children and helping you find your sweet spot of how can you best help the entire group of foster kids in our region. And two, then providing bridge services. For example, we run a tutoring program. We have an extracurricular mini grant program. We provide YMCA memberships, camperships, and birthday and holiday gifts. Those are some of the gap areas that social services can't readily cover. So that's a little snapshot of the organization. And me, once we decided to start that organization, I quit my job as an engineer and moved over, and this is what I do full time. So I tell you all that because this is my job 40 hours a week or more, is to engage with you all and make sure that you have what you need so that you can go out and serve children in foster care in our community. Mm-hmm. I'll pass it back to Erin.
Beautiful. So I'm Erin, and I live in Norfolk. I've been here for about 7 years. And 3-ish years ago, I think I've always had it on my heart to help children, like vulnerable children in our areas. And since I was little, I would send my mom like pictures of kids who were up for adoption and be like, can we please help? And she was like, no. And so I got to a point a few years ago where I was like, I need to be doing something to help, and I don't know what that is. And so I, after a quick Google search, found Audra and Tidewater Friends of Foster Care, and they were doing the Christmas or the holiday project, where basically Tidewater Friends of Foster Care sponsors all of the kids who are in care in our region and matches people from our locality to buy gifts for the kids. And so I emailed her and was like, I would like to do this. I made a commitment to sponsor 2 kids on my own. And then I turned to social media and I just posted to share with my friends and family what I was doing and said, if you want to do this too, go do it yourself. Like go learn more about Tidewater Friends of Foster Care, or if you don't want to do it but want to send me $60 to cover the gifts for a child, send me money and I will take care of it, no problem. And about I think 20 more kids were sponsored through that one post on Facebook. And I share that because number one, like we are so powerful, just the fact that you're here, it's a lot more than the 4 people who are attending this call. It's the 4 people plus your 100 people who are watching what you do, who are interested in your journey, who care about what you're doing, because each of them, there's probably 3 or 4 of them that care, and then they have another 100. So it's a big ripple effect that happens when all of us show up to kind of serve in whatever capacity that is for us. So what happened from there is Audra and I started working together. This is kind of the origin of the village, is this idea that like, oh, if I turn around and share, other people want to help. And so we created the village to bring those people who care and want to help together. And not everyone necessarily wants to be a foster parent, but they want to volunteer or they want to donate, or they're happy to sit at a table during a event when that's safe again. They're just willing to show up and talk about this. And so Foster Care Aware happened for the last month, and the goal of that was really to inspire and educate people so they know what's happening, because foster care has been around for years and it's not something we typically talk about. I think for a lot of people it feels painful. There's a lot of emotions that comes up, so we tend to avoid it. And what our goal is to start having those conversations, because even though this is hard, like we cannot ignore the kids who need families, and there is a need for families. I think right now in Norfolk specifically, but this is kind of speaks to in most places with an urban density, is I think there's, what is it, Audra, like 200 and something kids in 70 homes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a problem here, right, where there's more kids in care than homes that are open and willing to take children in and give them a loving, safe environment while their families are either figuring things out or while social services determines what's the next step for them.
And I'll jump in here just quickly, Erin, because I don't want people to think that those kids aren't going to a home. What happens is you end up with 2, 3, 4 kids in one home from different families. And that's not necessarily a great situation. That's just a bed, you know, in a space and a meal for a child. And they really need emotional healing. And that's why to grow the population of foster parents, so that there are parents waiting for children to be able to meet their needs and their selection from social services, so that they can select the right way to meet the needs. And then we have, you know, a situation where we're healing.
Right, exactly.
So, sorry.
No, that's such a good point. And please interject at any time. So that's kind of lay of the land as far as what we're doing here. So out of the village and Foster Care Aware, what we're gathering inside of the Prospective Parents program is people who are like, ooh, I think I might want to be a parent, or I definitely want to be a parent, and what's next? Because it's confusing and there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and it is not only a logistical journey, but it's an emotional journey. And what we've kind of set out to do within the Prospective Parents program is kind of be your guides along this journey. So I think I'll run through actually quickly, if that sounds good to you, Audra, just kind of what we're covering in the PPP.
Absolutely. I think it's great.
Okay. And then we'll kind of back up from there, and please know that everyone's going to have a chance to introduce yourselves and tell us like, what do you have questions about, so we can answer that specifically. But just so you have a bit of the lay of the land, as far as the PPP goes, our goal is to take you from person who is interested to either foster parent or an advocate of any kind. So just because you're here and you're interested in foster parenting doesn't mean that your end goal has to be becoming a foster parent and having a child in your house. I will share, like for me example, I, you know, have showed up to this with the intention of fostering one day, and like my day has not come yet, but I've done tons of advocacy work in the meantime to bring other parents to the table who are interested. So whatever your capacity is, we want to help you figure out that capacity so you can then show up and serve in whatever way works for you and for your family.
And the social service system in our region is a complex of different agencies. And choosing the right agency is extremely important. And part of the appeal to me when Erin brought the PPP concept up is that when I licensed, I just Google searched, right? And then I went down to the first info session and I ended up at an agency. And it happened to work for me, but there are different paths and you know, given different family dynamics, you might want to choose, or you absolutely do want to choose one agency over a different one. And so we want to explain that and the level of support that you get. And we want to be very transparent about some of this is really hard to be a parent and some agencies aren't going to support you, but it might be where your family, they get the type of children that your family can help the most. And so we want to be your support in those circumstances and help steer you towards or away, or at least inform you so you can make the best decision.
Yep, exactly. And just so you know that on our end, like we don't get anything for placing you with somewhere. There's no, it's just literally us having a lot of information and knowing that people don't have the information. And if you had it, you could make a more informed decision, and then you would be more likely to actually follow through and take care of these kids. So our goal is to get as many kids as possible taken care of in happy, healthy homes. So going from there, let's see. So inside of the PPP, here's what we're going to cover. And basically how this works is starting next week, Audra and I are going to be releasing like one module per week that will teach you about a specific piece of our training. And then on, let's see, I can't remember which day of the week it is, but one day a week, let me look. On Thursdays at 12:30 p.m., we're going to have open Q&A calls. So you can pop on and ask any questions based on the lesson, or if you just have random questions about the process, like just show up and use us as a resource where we're happy to talk through whatever's going on. So module overview. The first one is really about the world of foster care. So there's you in your current world, there's the children who are in care, and then there's like the village around that. So we just want to teach you about you know, the values of the village and the key players, because there are volunteers, donors, nonprofits, there are social workers, birth families, policymakers, like there's just a lot of people at play. And so we're just going to kind of teach you about that. And then my whole page just disappeared. So let's reopen that.
I could talk to it. The second module is about a fresh perspective on foster care. You know, what is it? I think we all probably know a little bit about it, but let's dive deep into it. Let's talk about the facts. Let's talk about racism and classism and poverty and how those all play together in our region in particular to drive a large population of the kids that are in foster care. And what do those kids need, and what do you need to be kind of a social justice warrior for these kids? And so we're going to have some real honest conversations about some of the injustices that kids face and how it disproportionately affects, you know, in our region, the African American community. And so we want to talk about, you know, that driving them into care, and then the trauma around being in care, not only being in care, being separated from your family, but also what happened before and how we can start to recognize some of the behaviors and deal with those behaviors in a way that helps move children forward, minimizing those behaviors. Because what happens is children in the foster care system get in a vicious cycle of trauma triggers manifesting in behaviors. Those behaviors trigger a negative response from the parent who doesn't quite understand them, and cycle continues until it's a vortex where children end up triggering foster parents on purpose to try and have control over their situation and blow up placement after placement. And that's when things have gone tragically wrong. So we want to prepare you that, you know, we can help.
Which sounds super intense, but what I would like to get across to you, no, it's, the thing is, like, it is intense. And once you have an understanding of what's going on, it's just a perspective shift that then allows you to interact with the whole system in a totally different way. So it really is about just like kind of opening your mind, hearing what we have to say like about it, and then you get to look through this lens of a different understanding, which is empowering to then move forward with. And quite honestly, even if you want to join us and only do those first 2 modules, it will change the way you look at the world, because everyone is in like a trauma state in some way or another. And it's really about holding space, being mindful of other people's, perception and their histories that like we don't really know about. And that comes up a lot with foster children, because when they come into our homes, we don't necessarily know exactly why they're there. Or if we know that one occurrence, we don't know the history leading up to that. And the same thing is true when you go to the post office and the clerk is rude, we don't know what happened. Like, so it just gives you this different perspective to really interact with the world in an empowering way. From there, we're going to talk about foster parenting 101, just kind of like the ins and outs, adoption. So we can set your expectations realistically for what's going to happen, because most of the time, right, we're all Google searching and just figuring out what we can find out. And when different, agencies or institutions have a goal, like if the goal is to be a foster parent, they can present that to you in different ways where like it's really hard and maybe they don't want certain people to do it, or they can say it's really easy because they want everyone to do it. And what we want to bring is just like truth and like from experience, here's what's happening. So you have a full picture. And what we find is like knowing that truth takes away some of the fear, because then it's like, okay, I have realistic expectations of what I'm going into, and then we can manage ourselves as we move into that.
And some of that content will be covered when you go to a licensing agency. We're looking at kind of the psychological preparation for it. They're more tactical and logistical, if you will, meaning they're going to give you some tools and send you through and here's your child. We want to kind of give you the mindset of each stakeholder and explain the process from front to end. It's something that I never have seen in a Pride class, and I think would be beneficial for you all.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Module 4 is all about the core values of PPP parents, which I think I'll actually run through real quick so you can hear them and know if this sounds and feels like you or things that you value as well. The first is flexibility, because we're all like the captains of our own ships, but we can't control the sea. So it's really about figuring out how to be the best captain. Soft hearts and strong boundaries, which is about, staying open and also asking for what you need. Clear, kind communication. So we'll be teaching about like different conscious communications tools and skills. And then the willingness to both love, and that includes the willingness to grieve, because there is attachment and detachment that is happening like as parents. And we really want to bring forth ways to gracefully transition. So acknowledging that there is pain and heartbreak and sadness, and what can we do to support you during those times, because we know they're going to happen. So just making sure that you are fully supported.
And I'm going to add, Erin, this is what Erin does as a living, is deal with all of what she does. She's a coach, and she's the perfect person to really teach these values. And it's not taught in the foster parent licensing process. So it's really important. And also from the perspective of, I've had 2 children go home, and it is extremely difficult. There is not support out there right now for that. The expectation is you just kind of suck it up and move along. And that's where a lot of parents exit stage right, because they say, I can't do this anymore. It hurts too bad. We're going to give you the skill sets to survive that, feel as good as you can about it, and then keep going. Choose. But you won't be high and dry and emotionally exhausted at the end of it. You'll feel supported.
Yes. Yep. And thank you for the introduction. I forgot that's what else I was going to say at the top when I was introducing myself, is my background that I am a coach and specifically focus on mindset. And so dealing with all of these in different ways is what I typically do in a business setting around money mindset and sales. And a lot of what I am doing is taking all of those lessons and applying it over here. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this, just so you do have a little bit of knowledge of who is this other person on the call. In module 5, we want to talk about creating a game plan. So basically identifying, where are you in your journey? What are your next steps? Who is your support system? How can we help you build a support system while also being part of that? What challenges or obstacles may get in your way, and how can we kind of like take whatever initiative we need to take around that? And basically, making sure you're set up with the right agency to take the next steps. The next thing we'll kind of cover is coaching and community. So you will have the opportunity, if you want to go through the PPP and become a foster parent, to work with a one-on-one coach. That way, as things are coming up, if you need to talk to someone, we will have someone you can talk to.
They'll be checking in with you as well to make sure that you're getting what you need at the because we have a lot of relationships with the agency, and we can kind of go around and make sure that you're getting treated well and you're moving and you're progressing as you need to. But that also, if you have any questions and concerns and you just need a little moral support to take the next step, that you've got someone with you doing that.
Yep, absolutely. And life happens as we're going about our plans. So kind of just like taking things as they come and figuring out like, okay, do we move forward? Do we need to pause for a second? Like, what is correct here? From there, we're really going to focus on you and taking care of yourself, because as parents, like, we can only give as much as we have, right? If our cup's not full, that shows up like in the way that we're parenting. And when we're trying to do that in a mindful way, it's incredibly important that we're taking care of ourselves. So we'll just talk about like ways that you can do that realistically. I have 2 little kids of my own. And so I get the fact that like, it's hard when you're working and have kids and then to take care of yourself and then to show up and have quality time. So we'll be figuring out like, how does that work for each of us individually? And then we'll also be adding like bonus modules as we go based on what you need, including the whole like thinking about transition gracefully. There are like some experts that Audra has like turned to in times of transition that we want to have come in and actually share with you. And we'll be kind of like developing that curriculum as we go, because it really is something that's missing from the agency side from what we've seen.
Perfect, Erin. And I would say also we have a law professor that I've interacted with in the past that is going to do a module for us on, you know, what is the child welfare policy in our state and how do we navigate that as child advocates, right? Because everybody here now, I believe, is a child advocate. And let me tell you, they need advocacy. And a lot of what you'll see and we talk about is that, you know, there's all these stakeholders and we'll talk about all the adults at the table, but the children are left out as a stakeholder, and sometimes their best interest is not served. It just gets kind of trampled in a very arduous, very red tape process. And so what we'll ultimately ask you to do is be an advocate for them. And that's not always easy given the position you're in as a foster parent. You typically don't have standing, but there is a way to advocate for them. So we'll bring Jim Dwyer in to talk about that as well.
Yep, absolutely. So that was obviously a lot of information. And I just want you to know that like you'll be receiving information, but also it's conversational as we go. And so please don't let that scare you away. At this point, what I think we would love to do is actually have you go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself. So maybe we'll start with Hillary, if you're open to kicking us off. And just let us know who you are, what kind of brings you here. And then if you have questions, I will write them down. And I think let's gather the questions and then we can kind of go through them because I bet people will have similar questions as we go through.
Yeah. So I can kind of relate to your story a lot. It's something that I've always been interested in. There wasn't really one moment in particular, but I wasn't ready to start fostering, you know, from that point. So I have volunteered with CASA in Chesapeake. I'm currently mentoring with the Up Center in Norfolk, and I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer to the step that, you know, I'd like to take to foster, but I just need a little bit more logistics support to figure out, like my house is weirdly shaped. So, you know, how much space do we need? Just stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Are there questions today that would, like, do you want to talk about the logistics and like sort of if we go over housing requirements, so to speak, would that be helpful?
Yeah. I mean, just, you know, if like there's a resource that I could go to, like a checklist, you know, like you need this much space or you need this, and because we're doing a bunch of remodeling right now. So I figure if I can do it right now, you know, I'll just kind of check that off my list before we get started with the training and stuff.
That's perfect. So even you just telling us like your questions is great, because we are happy to go and create the guides that don't exist right now of like, here are the requirements.
Right.
So perfect. Audra, do you want to talk about that real quick?
Unmute because I've been talking, sorry. Unmute. We have a checklist on our website, Apologies. It's a big website. So I will make sure that we post that to the PPP. Okay. And it's, you know, each agency has their own policies. There's like Virginia law, and that's what most of the social service, like the city agencies follow. And then the therapeutic agencies have a different standard, it's their prerogative, as long as they, those standards encompass the Virginia. But we have a good checklist on our website, and we'll post that to the village.
Okay.
Or the PPP.
Yeah, we can do both actually. Yep.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing, Hillary, and thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jacques, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. So hi, my name is Jacques. It's me and my wife Tabitha. She's not here right now. She called into work, so I'm taking the flag and running with it.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Awesome.
Not a problem. We don't have any real questions yet, except for just kind of like we're just trying to learn how to get started. My wife, she's a labor delivery nurse, and so she deals with moms all the time that are sometimes in situations, where they, can't keep the child, or whatever the situation is. And so our hearts really kind of go out to wanting to help, serve the community, and kind of like, take, some of these kids in that, need, like you said, like a loving home, and, that environment for them to rebuild their lives and stuff like that. So that's kind of like what our motivation is for this, is to really just kind of, open up our home and our hearts and stuff like that to, help these kids. So we're just kind of, in the baby steps right now. We know we want to foster, just because it's on our hearts, and it's been kind of all like, like we've been kind of talking about it back and forth and everything else. And so now we're just kind of in the steps of, where do we start? What do we need to do? That kind of stuff. So it's just, now moving forward and everything else, stuff like that. So.
Okay, cool. Which city are you in?
We live in Virginia Beach.
Okay, cool. And do you have like children, biological children?
Yeah, we have one boy, and he's 7.
Awesome. I actually remember reading your form now that you say that. Okay,
Yep.
great. So yeah, we can definitely like talk through that logistically. We can book like a one-on-one call so we can talk, really about your unique situation and like what would work best for your family,
Okay.
and then make recommendations based on that. And then I would absolutely say like being in PPP and going through those, the modules and stuff will be super helpful, just as far as like getting the lay of the land and moving through and having the support as you do that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then just figuring out like what, I guess agency to go with, and
Exactly.
all that stuff. So, so it's just a lot of questions of, how and where to get started and what works best for us. And, I think like you said, like the one-on-one call would probably be, we can like dive deeper into that kind of thing. So
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And our goal is to pair you up with an agency or two at the end of this process, once we kind of noodle through, the ins and outs of your homes, your desires, your ability to help. And we have interviewed a lot of the different agencies around town. And so we can actually help make a direct, warm handshake with them once you've picked.
All right.
Right. Perfect.
All right, let's see. I'm just going to go around the circle here on my screen. Melissa, are you able to pop on and introduce yourself?
Hi, I am. Let me just see. My internet hasn't been working the best, so let's try video. But I'll turn it back off if it gets spotty. So I did miss the very first part too, so I apologize. Juggling work meetings and all of that, but was grateful to join today, and thank you for the information that you all did share. Gosh, so we are probably a little bit more similar to Jacques, your kind of situation. So I'm married, have a 5-year-old little boy. He is just precious, and his, so I always envision myself as potentially adopting. Was also interested in potentially fostering, but I think currently for my family and I, we do desire to have additional children. It has not happened biologically. So for me, that's, kind of opened up this conversation around adoption, which my husband is not quite ready for. And so we've kind of settled on this thought of fostering, But I think, even that we, so much to learn. I think we're mostly concerned with just the emotional side of it, and if that's something we can handle, and then particularly with a little one in the picture, and how he would kind of handle that. So I think, those are a lot of our concerns. I have heard a bit about, I forget the how you all may refer to it, but just about the age of children. And so I think, it's tough, because I think as someone who always wants to help where help is needed most, but I think given that we have a 5-year-old, we're looking to potentially foster children that are 5 and under. Have just heard that that's a little bit easier for children, so that is a factor for us. And I know when I had reached out to some agencies, it seemed to me like a lot of the agencies that are not, I guess, just directly social services tend to work with either older kids or therapeutic, et cetera. So
or sibling groups. Yep, that's
okay.
right. Yep.
So it felt like, we would potentially have to work with social services. So I think for me, just understanding some of those differences, that you all were mentioning with the agencies and what support they provide. Another factor is we are currently in Virginia Beach, but may at some point move to Chesapeake and or just out of the area. We have family here and we're from here, but like, how does all of that kind of play into it? And I would say, foster to adopt is probably more of what we're interested in, but also I feel like I've kind of received these mixed messages of like, when you go into foster care, you shouldn't have that expectation that you're adopting, and that really the end goal is to get those children back with their families. So believing in that, kind of wholeheartedly, I guess also just noting that, probably a bit of a different dynamic, but my husband is actually from abroad, from Ethiopia, where a lot of children have been adopted. They're now closed to US adoptions. And frankly, because a lot of children have been adopted that their parents didn't want them to be adopted, so I think I love this aspect of being able to really reunite, children with families, but again, just that emotional toll and, what's really in the best interest of the child. And I guess just, again, with my husband being from Ethiopia, was raised there, so kind of a different history than, an African-American raised in the States, but obviously just generally, and then with everything going on in the world right now, wanting to just provide, the best in education, and for, we have a multiracial child, but how does that, kind of play out in the foster and the adoption space? As well. And so many more questions, but I'll stop there for now.
No, that's it's perfect. And so I'm going to address a couple of the questions just superficially, and we can get, we will absolutely cover this in more detail as we go through the modules. Birth order is what they recommend, is that you always take placements that are the age or younger than your children, and preferably younger. And that helps the birth children, not necessarily the foster children. And kind of that said, you're absolutely right. The private agencies typically get older children because it's a therapeutically driven placement. These are therapeutically driven placements agencies. And so typically the teens are deemed harder to place with more behavioral issues. And so they go there to therapeutic agencies. If you are to get a younger children in a therapeutic setting, they're typically coming in as part of a sibling group with older children, or a sibling group that is hard to place, 4, 5, 6, something like that. So absolutely right. You probably are going to steer towards a city agency. And I think all of them are going to tell you that, don't come in expecting adoption. And that's because it's a custody case. It's ongoing. It is uncertain in the courts, even in circumstances that are clearly everybody around is like no brainer, it should be adoption. Sometimes the courts make crazy decisions, and that's part of the curriculum we offer to you is how do you survive those crazy decisions? How do you live within it? How do you advocate for these kids and what's in the best interest of the children that are now a part of your family, in the bounds, right? In the realm that you have space to influence. So we want, you're in the right place. I could say that you're absolutely in the right place, and we'll cover, a lot of your questions. And then we can help you, throughout placements. But I will say that I've done birth order in my placements, not by edict or mandate, I just ended up that way. It doesn't make it much easier. It just doesn't. So don't preclude teens just because, you know, that the general rule. What's most important is that you're prepared and that you're the parent that can help your biological child navigate this. And so you being informed is more important than anything else, than any birth order. So don't let it scare you, because the other side of it is the teens absolutely have to have love. You know, that's the basis of all of what we're saying, is that these children are coming into care. They have to be loved. And if they're not loved, they end up broken people. And so this is our opportunity to step in and really change the world for them by walking the walk. And it's hard to walk the walk sometimes, given, you know, a severe trauma. You know, if you don't understand the trauma, it impacts you, but we're going to give you the tools to do that.
Yeah. Melissa, I think you make a really good point too, that there's so much contradicting information, which is like, the truth is some of these kids will need to be adopted, and absolutely we want people who would welcome them into their families on a permanent basis. And there's also truth in like, yes, you have to be ready to hand these kids back, and we're thinking like the best thing there. And so I think the beauty of the PPP is that we're like, welcome to the land of contradictions. And like, let's sort through and figure out what would actually be best for your family and what you could really give. And then we'll like move through with knowing that to make this, you know what I mean? Because there are rules or guidelines even of like the age order, and then there's room to break those guidelines, you know, within if it's what works for you. And so our goal is to really help you figure out like what would work best for your family, and then kind of move from there. And one other thing, which Audra is kind of like a question for you, because Audra, you have adopted from foster care.
Yeah. And
when that happened, like, can you just speak to a little bit about like how that worked? I don't even know the story, I don't think, but like. Sure.
So, you know, my first placement came to us just before his 3rd birthday, and his mom had surrendered him to foster care. She had drug addiction issues and 4 other children that she wasn't able to keep custody of, ranging from like 18 years old all the way down to younger than Kate and my son. And initially, she was supposed to just be a few weeks, you know, for suicidal ideation. She checked into a facility to help her, and then checked out, and then just went on a binge and just never came back fully for him. She went through the motions of trying the different classes. They throw a lot at birth parents, by the way, and it's almost insurmountable what they have to do and maintain jobs 9 to 5. But she went through the motions of many of the courses and the visitation, and then just kind of fell apart at the end. And we had, you know, we brought her into our sphere. We showed her our world, because a lot of the birth families don't know you. They have this fear of foster care, which is the ugly side, the picture of people just doing it for money and bed and all of that, not really caring about their children. But we had let her into our world to see, hey, this isn't a scary place. He's being well taken care of. You know, let's walk this together. And ultimately, she kind of knew that she was running out of time, and her attorney ended up convincing her that her son has a good placement, that we would facilitate a relationship, that this is probably the best, given the history of, you know, her family, that this was the best place for him. And she entrusted him to us. And the goal was going to be changed to adoption, whether she had or not. But that process took about a year. And then you know, there's court hearings, and we'll talk to you about those court hearings, because the court system and the way things get processed is very frustrating, often for foster parents and children and attorneys and social workers. But it eventually led at the 2-year mark, he was adopted. So I think a lot of social service agencies are going to say, no, don't come here expecting to adopt, because they just don't want you ending up petitioning for custody. You get attached and not willing to let go of a child, and then you disrupt their system by going around and petitioning for custody. That's what they're trying to avoid when they tell you, you know, don't expect it. But, you know, it depends on year to year. but I haven't seen a year where we've had less than 50% of the kids adopted. So that, you know, as an end goal.
You have a follow-up
question.
And on that, and with not, you know, fully knowing the process and the terminology, but I know I've heard of this like termination of parental rights.
That has to happen before adoption.
And is there a different process? Like, let's say that, you know, a child is in the foster care system, but then they've already had those parental rights terminated. Are they still kind of in the same pool, or like what does DSS or whatever do at that point with those?
They're different. If a child has terminated parental rights and they're younger than 14, they are eligible for adoption. And so you typically, I think typically those kids are getting adopted out through agencies that deal with adoption, and they do the home study process that DHS is not, the Human Services Office is not directly doing that, but you can. I know that you can. It is possible. We just have to get you in touch with the right people. But if the child is 14 or older, they get to say whether they get adopted or not. And often those children don't want to be adopted. It does not that they don't want permanent family. They feel as a betrayal to their family of origin. And so it's very conflicting for them in adoption. And by the way, we probably ought to do a module on adoption, Erin, just because, you know, from our side, we look at it as a very wonderful, positive, exciting, celebratory thing. But for the children we adopt, sometimes it's not. And understanding that helps prevent conflict and hurt, frankly.
Thank you both.
Mm-hmm, sure.
It's so big.
Like, it's so big.
There's no simple. But there is space for you to foster and adopt if that feels what is right for you. And when you go through the licensing process, I know definitely in Norfolk, and I think a bunch of the other agencies we spoke to too, is that you are licensed to foster and adopt through that PRIDE training and everything. So you are set up for that. And not all families who decide to foster are open to adoption. And so that choice is yours too.
Right. And the state, it has a goal of one placement, meaning that, you know, one home initiative, kind of where a child comes into foster care, they have one home the entire time they're in foster care, and then the next thing they end up with is permanency, and that's either in that one home or back with their family of origin. It's a very idyllic situation, and it doesn't always happen that way, but that's the goal, and that's really what's best for a child, is that they have as few family disruptions as possible, because every family disruption they have hurts their soul, if you will. It mars them almost forever. So we're trying to avoid that. Okay.
Thank you so much for your questions, Melissa. Yeah, Crystal, are you? Hi.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if I'm quite ready to foster, but I'm interested in it, and I know people that have done it. Mm-hmm. And one day I was my niece had to take her to her swim class at the Y, and I was like, wow, this would be cool if I could provide opportunities or, you know, other things to kids so they could, you know, have an opportunity to be exposed to things. That's my main, I think, thing that I'm focused on right now. Mm-hmm. So it's just getting information. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Perfect. Where are you located, Crystal?
Right now I'm in Portsmouth, but I'm in the process of moving, so I don't know where I'm moving to. So.
Yep. All good. Okay. So I would say, like, if you are interested, that is enough for us as far as like come into the PPP and just start learning. And like, even if parenting isn't necessarily for you right now or ever, like we can help you figure out like, oh, you want to give back in that particular way. Like, let's figure out what that looks like. And we can kind of support you in figuring out whether that's just a volunteer thing, or is it something you start, or is there a family who you know what I mean? Where you can be part of a family's village, meaning like someone who's just helping, right? So yeah, I would say if it's on your heart, like you're here for a reason, even if now's not the time for parenting, and like, we've got you, we'll help you figure out what that looks like. And it might change as we kind of go along the course, but you're more than welcome to be here.
Okay, thanks, great.
And let me address the question that Crystal brought up, that Melissa also brought up, which is moving. So you can license at a therapeutic agency basically anywhere you can end up driving conveniently back and forth to them. And I'd say, let's say a 45-minute radius, right? And for a therapeutic agency, they can take children from any city. Okay. They contract out you as a foster parent to the cities. Okay. If you license with a city, you do not have to live in that city. But again, you have to be close enough to that city to be able to get back and forth to the social service office. And you're in a visitation situation, you might be doing that once, twice a week. And city agencies aren't going to provide transportation for your foster child to go back and forth to visitations. They're going to expect you to do that. So all that said, you can move. You just can't move out of the state and take the children with you. And realistically, they're probably going to pull a placement from you if you move an hour, because their social worker has to come out and visit the child in your home at least once a month. So that gives you kind of a soft answer on can you move? Yes. Do you have to license in the city that you live? No. You just need to be able to get the children back and forth to court or to visitation, and visitations typically held at social service offices.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no
Sure.
problem.
Thanks
for being here, Crystal. Megan, would you like to pop on?
We have one other. We have an iPhone that we don't know.
Yes, the iPhone, it doesn't have a name. So if you were on the call but you haven't said hello, yay, iPhone.
There you are. Hi.
I'm just trying to learn about, I guess, the adoption process. I mean, the foster care process, and how reunification works. And because my grandchildren were just recently put in foster care.
Okay.
And I want to see, what is it like for parents to be reunified.
Yeah, sure.
Reunified back to their home, because I can see that the children in foster care right now are being traumatized during every visitation with their parents by having to say goodbye.
Yes, they are. That is a very keen observation, and it's one of the things about the foster care system that drives me nuts. It creates attachment disorder just by virtue of the fact that it exists and the way that it's implemented. And that's not going to change anytime soon. I cannot agree with you more. I remember the first time I took my now son to see his mother, and the first time he had seen her in 3 weeks since he had been in foster care. And that wasn't her choice. That was the social service agency's choice. And he met with her. He was relieved to see her. He was sad. They played. And then the worker said, okay, it's over. Go get him. And I literally had to peel him off of her, screaming and crying. The two of them were sobbing uncontrollably. I started sobbing uncontrollably. It was traumatic. And so you're absolutely right. I didn't catch your name. I'm sorry. Can I get your name?
My name is
Julie. Your first name? Julie. Thank you, Julie. Julie, you're absolutely right. And what we need to do as a group of folks is be able to reach out to birth families and create that family connection so that it's not traumatic. So Julie, when that foster family is now supporting the birth family and says, we're just an extension, right? We're the aunties and uncles, the fictive kin that live next door. We're the people that are just helping out for a while. And that narrative and the approach, subtle, but it's so, so important. I'll give you one more example. And then Julie, I would love to have you here and your perspective, because it's unique among the group. And we can also help support you through what you're going through. But I recently had a child leave my home after 4 years to go live with her grandmother. And it was so traumatic, but for all of us. But the narrative we gave was, you get to do this. And this is part of, you get to live with this other part of your family, and we're still going to be here as your family, and we're going to be loving you the same way we did here, there, and we're so excited for you. And that little bit of shift made all the difference for a very scared 4-year-old. And she was very brave when she left And that relationship, I think, will help as the grandmother then reaches out to us and said, here, look, you know, raising a child takes a village. Erin, she actually said this, raising a child takes a village. We need you as part of ours. And so it then becomes families helping families, because Julie, I think that foster care can be very scary, especially some of the rumors there. And what I want to say to you is the types of parents we're trying to cultivate are those that are not scary, that are helpful, make sure that these children are served in the best way to be returned to their families, and that relationship is one of support that is ongoing for the long term.
Right. So I'm just in here to learn, like,
perfect,
how these biological parents get the resources and help that they need to help them get their kids back. I haven't seen it in the CPS
I know
that my daughter has been dealing with. And actually, she did get 3 of them back this week. And she didn't want the younger ones to be told that the older ones got to come back. But social services said, yeah, you need to tell them. And that was traumatic to the younger children, because they're like, well, why can they come back, but we can't? And they were devastated to hear that their brothers and sisters, some of them came back and they couldn't come back.
Right, of course. It's and I'll the only thing I can say is I don't say it's broken, but it doesn't serve children very well often, the foster care system. Right. And what it is, it's up to people like you and the rest of the folks here to make it work in the short term, while, you know, we amass an army of advocates to go march on Washington and change policy, because it takes policy at the state level, and it takes policy and training at the implementation level, at the city, at the local social service agency level. And that all has to happen in unison with us making sure that these kids are well protected.
Right. So I'm just trying to educate myself so I can maybe educate my daughter.
Right. Sure. Absolutely. And we will help. Absolutely help.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Julie, I appreciate you just sharing too, because it is a perspective that we don't frequently hear. And it's just such a good reminder of, like, everyone in this world, right, is like, everyone's humaning, and everyone wants, like, there's people on both sides who are trying to do best for these kids. And so it's helpful to just hear that. And I think as far as, like, the visitations and the trauma that's being experienced, like, the best thing that we can do as parents is as foster parents is build relationships with the biological parents, and, you know, recognize and hold space that, like, we're all in our humanness, and, like, how can we help so these kids are taken care of the best. And then, you know, the logistical sides and the what's actually happening with the parent side. Audra, is that typically, like, is the social worker in charge of that too, or is there another caseworker that deals with, like, the birth parents?
So the social worker for the child is the one that typically will deal with the birth family, but it's more from the perspective of creating a case plan for the child. And there aren't a whole lot of supports for, you know, birth families. I mean, there's a regimen that has to be, you know, like these are all the steps you have to do to get back your child. But if you can think about what a vulnerable position that puts you in, I mean, it almost is suffocating that, okay, now I've got to take, you know, I've got to take medication management. I've got to take parenting class. I've got to take, you know, I've got to have a job. I've got to take, you know, all these different courses, and got to maintain, you know, my living and my home and my other children, or my, you know, whatever. It's almost insurmountable. And so what we've seen is the most successful birth families are the ones that have foster family support, because foster families actually go on and do things with and for birth families, including Julie, you know, we have my son's grandparents were very helpful together with us to help his mother and his sisters and things like that. So it's really families helping families. I think that's the way to move forward. And, you know, not marriage social workers, they're working very hard and they're doing the best that they can, but they're overworked, they're underpaid, there's turnover retail. And really the policies are the policies that they have to work with guidelines. And so sometimes whether or not they're in agreement with what happens at the court level, they have to go along with it. They have to implement what the court says. And so, yeah, it's a hard system to navigate. And in the end, sometimes, like I said, the child's rights get trampled, and what's in the best interest of the child gets trampled. So that's why I think it's important to understand, how to advocate within the system.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Well, we got 2 minutes left.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes. So I'll just talk about next steps for a second. Megan sent me a message. She's listening.
Okay.
She's good. Okay. So thank you so much for being here. Number one, again, and I know these conversations are big and heavy because we are talking about real problems in the world. So I just want to commend you for being here, for listening, for showing up, because this is step one of making any change, right? And for caring for these kids, this is where it starts. So thank you for being here and being open to listening and willing to take that step, even if it's just raising your hand and saying I'm here, don't know what to do, but I'm here for it. We really appreciate that. Because you made it to the end of this call, if you feel like you are here and you want to have a one-on-one call with us, you are welcome to go to tidewaterffc.org/call and set up a one-on-one session so we can talk. If you have questions and want to send an email, if that's more your style, info@tidewaterffc.org, you're welcome to send an email and we will take care of that and make sure your questions are answered. And then the PPP is officially going to be starting next week. So make sure you're in that Facebook group. And if you have questions or need a link or anything, just shoot us an email and we'll make sure you have everything you need. And that's basically it for today. So we will be active in the Facebook group next week. There will be another info question and answer review what we talked about call on Thursday that you are welcome to log into to join us live, to listen to later, drop questions in the group. And we want to really create an interactive experience where you can come with any questions and we're going to help figure it out. And the thing is we're figuring it out with you. We don't have all of the answers, but Audra's been navigating this path for a while now. So she does have a plethora of information, and anything we don't know, we are ready and equipped to reach out to our friends and colleagues and supporters and get the answers that we need so you can feel ready to walk into this world in whatever capacity of advocacy you want. And we have your back in that.
I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. I'm very, very excited about you all moving forward in helping these kids and whatever that looks like. We're just really grateful. These kids, there are too many of them in foster care, and there are too many of them that go without their needs met. So thank you so much for showing up for them.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Have a great weekend. Don't be afraid to book a call. Thank you for being here.
Please.
Yeah, we love talking about this, right? And would be honored to help you figure out your next steps. So chat soon. Thank you so much. And
Thanks. Bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.